Hello, everyone. Welcome to the middle live stream for the September 2022 Complexity Weekend. We're going to have about 10 minutes of Michael Garfield music, and then we'll be on to a 1 hour Teams-centered middle live stream. So enjoy the tunes and see you soon. All right. Welcome. Greetings, Sean.
How's it going? How's your experience so far?
The experience of waking up is great. Um, and attended some awesome sessions yesterday. What about you?
Oh, I had a lot of fun in a late night. Typical for my CW experience. Not as late as normal, which is actually refreshing. So I think I'm finally heeding our own advice of not pushing your body too far in pursuit of knowledge and all the fun, curiosity fulfilling activities in CW.
Awesome. Well, let's begin with just looking at the program, checking in with where we are, and then talking about teams for this middle live stream. It is 14 UTC on Saturday, the 24th. And also, everyone watching along live, please feel free to add any questions in the live chat. This is going to be a 1 hour live stream where we talk about teams at CW and we go over some of the teams' details before we head off into the teams fair. So, I'm here in the program page and highlighting the row with the middle live stream. So for those who are watching along, you've found it. Anyone else, you can click that link with the middle live stream. And we've had a bunch of sessions and flexible time already happening. And now we're heading into the back half. We're heading into the second half of the CW experience. And one of the key pieces is the team's experience. This is going to kick off following the live stream with a teams fair that will be co-facilitated with Jessica. And that'll be an opportunity to learn a little bit more about what others are up to in their teams, whether it's been a team that they've seeded or not. And then from that point on, there will be continuing alternation of flexible time and facilitated sessions heading us into the closing live stream. So let's go over to the Jamboard and I will bring up the first slide, and Sean, you can give an overview while I crop things on the live stream.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, anyone can choose to participate however they like during Complexity Weekend. There is a suggested mode of participation that is kind of the most active and the most involved, and we think, as organizers, is the most effective way to kind of learn complexity in this compressed time frame. And that is to really enter into a diverse team with other participants and really start unpacking a lot of the stuff we've learned about complexity generally and in conversation so far into a real system in front of us that we're passionate about wanting to affect in some way or alter in some way and make better, and work with others from different perspectives to come to agreements about how complexity is embodied in this particular system and what might be a good intervention in the system. I think unpacking things in that kind of practical setting and rolling up your sleeves is really helpful to take something that can be very, very abstract like complexity and start to make it more chunked up and more understandable and bite-sized, in this weekend. And if you do that several weekends, you do that over weeks, that's where that kind of embodied wisdom of understanding complexity over time can come from. I think if you stay too long kind of at the abstract level and you don't really roll up your sleeves and get into the applied complexity, you can kind of hit a wall in my experience. So it seems intimidating up front to join a team and do this over the weekend, but I just want to stress really early on that teams can be of any form and they don't have to be a commitment. If you've already got 3 jobs or whatever, right, you don't need to join a team and feel like you have to, continue after the weekend and I've got another job all of a sudden, right? A team could be literally formed for the weekend with the purpose of learning as much as possible with others. And then you all agree to just dissolve after the weekend. That's totally fine. Or, your team could be more like a social club that's not intended to be a serious, like focused effort where we're now building, a tech platform and we're going to meet, 2 times a week after the weekend to build it. It could be an informal thing where you want to discuss books every once in a while and, have kind of like a book club thing going and everyone can talk about their work outside of that team setting and kind of get advice from each other. It's really up to you to structure this type of collaboration and relationship with other participants however you'd like. And as long as everyone is in communication with each other about expectations, and half the team isn't like, we're definitely going to run and try to fundraise for a startup after the weekend. The other half doesn't want to do that but isn't sharing that. That's where you can enter territory that'd be better, to communicate upfront expectations.
Awesome. So that's a nice overview to teams. There are some pieces that we're going to cover in this first part of the live stream. And as with most interactive activities, the way it really plays out is you engaging with other participants synchronously in Gather. So that means showing up to the Teams Fair and to other sessions, and asynchronously. And we'll highlight some asynchronous opportunities in the coda for ways you can learn about different teams and contact people. And also for those who are using the key-based messaging, we can mention that. Let's continue to the next pitch. So, Sean, you mentioned several of these, but do you want to talk about why form teams?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's what I love about our slides is that people are constantly adding cool things to them. So I don't know if Daniel or if you or somebody else added it in the upper right corner, but I love these 4 words or 4 phrases: motivation, accountability, accelerated learning, and increased impact. I think that's really succinct way to say it all. I mean, there's something magic about the energy you get collaborating with others that can be hard to replicate when it's just you trying to motivate yourself to learn. And there's something about accountability, checking in regularly with others, whether that's just over the weekend where you're going to maybe check in once or twice a day, or a team where you might meet weekly after the weekend and have that accountability of some sort of synchronous stuff you work on together during the week, and then maybe a couple of tasks you do in between the weekly calls. That type of accountability can really accelerate your learning and actually make it much more, doing a lot more and learning a lot more than maybe you would do just sitting in a room alone. And then increased impact. I mean, one of the things we always stress is that, the types of problems that we're usually interested in trying to help with at Complexity Weekend are very big problems that are long-standing. They're so-called wicked problems, and a lot of the time. And, those types of problems, they require multiple perspectives to even have a chance at getting to the true nature of the problem and having some sort of solution that isn't rushed and doesn't end up causing more harm than you'd think, putting it in place. So that type of sustained long-term impact is something that a diverse team can really help harness. Carolina, I'd be curious to hear just what your thoughts are, having been on a team in Complexity Weekend and having experienced that, how do these bullets and these points speak to you?
Yeah, for me, definitely the ones around motivation and accountability. The teams that I've joined haven't stayed, as you mentioned, necessarily active for very long, but while they were, one of them really pushed me to learn Python, just because we were meeting every week and we thought, okay, now this is the time, we're already doing this together. So I think really just it helps you to not do things alone. And you also mentioned about in the morning, I think you can talk about increased impact. There were conversations in the morning about creating teams, just about sharing around each other's work. Who knows what kind of ideas can be sparked just by being in a conversation with others that are even in this kind of ecotone. So if you're bringing people from different backgrounds together around one topic of interest, who knows what kind of innovation could be sparked. So, and what kind of impact you might be able to bring into your work just by sharing these ideas with others on a team.
I love that each Complexity Weekend, there's like some terms or concepts that just naturally kind of emerge as something everyone's excited to share. We've had catechisms, we've had stigmergy, like from past cohorts, and I definitely get a sense of like ecotones is starting to pop out. And I know Michaela and another facilitator are co-facilitating a session on that later. I'm definitely excited for that. Or rough example would be like where I think they say like where a plains meets like a forest, and where the lots of innovation that can happen when two ecosystems kind of have a boundary. Real quick, Dan, I think it'd be good just to highlight that last point, which is just highlighting again, CW is a deep time community practice, and we're trying to be a community backdrop. So, these biannual weekend cohorts that we're in right now, they happen twice a year, right? That's kind of our peak energy of the community. New teams form, lots of reconnections occur with everyone all together. And then we have, when there isn't a weekend going on, we have heartbeats, monthly heartbeats. So there's constantly something going on in the community to come back to as an individual or as a team. So really it would benefit yourself and your team to harness that energy and actually allow it to reinfuse you, reconnect you, and just kind of keep the momentum going. Any last thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, just that the pace of teamwork, I totally agree with what everyone else added. Sometimes it feels like it's easy to work with others and have a rhythm even once a month to keep us on track. And then at the level above the team, CW is setting another rhythm. And so that's an opportunity to give a spotlight talk or ask for help or feedback or sounding board at the heartbeats. So we are realistic about time and impact and complexity. And that's why we're taking this approach with teams. So this is not like out of naivety that we're encouraging people to rush into teams that are overcommittal for them on a pace that's not realistic. It's actually the opposite. And so hopefully we can draw that out, about how to have realistic, effective teams and where the CW community fits in with helping teams. Let's look at a few frequently asked team questions.
Sorry, Dan, a quick point just about how, an example of we're on a team that came out of November Complexity Weekend. And, I think the point that you don't really accomplish too much over the weekend, that, don't set your expectations that you're going to completely build everything over a weekend or whatnot. Like that team since November is maybe we've been meeting every week basically since then. It's still ongoing. We're thinking of building something together. And I think we're maybe in the last month is when we really are hitting our stride in terms of knowing what we really want to build. Everyone working asynchronously on tasks to build this particular prototype. And so you have to be realistic about the time it really takes. If your purpose of your team is to build something together, potentially a company and things like that, you have to be realistic about how long it takes to do things like that and how much upfront time it takes for everyone to get to know each other, get comfortable, and then get into a different phase of the work.
All right. Would you like to ask the question or answer the question?
I'll ask the question.
All right.
Can I start or join a team?
Yes, everyone can start or join a team. The team is in ultimate control over how they do everything. There are CW committees where they're 100% open to everybody and they'll have a rhythm and a purpose that is helping CW. And there'll be many niches for people to carve out inside of the committees, which are like a special kind of team. But as far as participant-led teams go, yes, you can start one or you can join one, and we'll look at how that can happen.
Yeah, and I think something to highlight there too is, it's up to the team what that looks like in terms of joining. We have a column, I think, in the Team Seed part of the program where teams are expressing, if they're open to new participants. We ask any existing team that interfaces with CW to be open to some degree to being influenced, and that could just mean they really want feedback on what they're doing. They're not maybe open to new participants coming on the team, but they want to share their ideas freely and get lots of feedback in that kind of boundary. Or there's lots of teams, most of them actually, that are open to new participants, and they might express what type, skills they're missing in their team, or they might like to be just delightfully surprised, like I've been at Complexity Weekend, just who I bump into, and a perspective I was not expecting, but now that I'm around it, I need you in on this if you're willing. So it's really up to the team as to their boundary setting of the openness that they have, and it's all back to communication. So Carolina or Daniel, what do teams aim to do typically, ones that you've experienced?
We've seen a lot of different things, and just like a complex trajectory, what the team sets off to do in the days and weeks after the weekend isn't always exactly how it ends up developing. And a relationship can turn into a business or a research project, or something that seems like it's initially headed towards more of a professional outcome can develop into more of a personal outcome. So many things can happen. I think you mentioned earlier that it can be anywhere from just a casual re-meeting group or a reading discussion space towards a more project-oriented space for a group that wants to achieve some specific outcome.
Killian, do you want to add anything just the teams you've observed and what they've been wanting to do together?
Yeah, I just think one of the things you're reminding me of a conversation that we had, Daniel, around, I think it was around the last weekend. What is success for a team? Maybe you have all of these ideas about getting together a lot of people, but that might actually not work. You might form a huge team and then suddenly that actually doesn't get a lot of traction, but just getting one or two people really interested, and you really get together and you really end up doing something together around the topic that you're interested in, even if it isn't what you initially imagined, but just really having an impact on each other, that I think can be really powerful. So not putting those expectations and not letting yourself get affected, just being a kind of an adaptive system, looking at your team as an adaptive system, I guess.
All right. Do I have to join a team to be in Complexity Weekend? No. It's one mode of participating. You're already on a team when you show up for sessions, when you're in a conversation, however you're showing up. You don't have to be in any degree of formality of team. It's just one opportunity that we want to scaffold because there's so much to gain by working on teams. When do teams form? They form anytime, especially during the weekend. It's kind of like an energy peak, but that's not the beginning or the end of team formation. So it can happen anytime. And we're going to look at the team seed form and talk about how teams can have continuous seeding. Do you need to continue with your team after the weekend? No. The weekend isn't a hackathon, or it's not a race to the finish. And so there can be different time durations of what the team wants to do. Maybe it is a time-bound team. Maybe it's a 2-hour team. Maybe it's an open-ended adventure. Realistically, though, to achieve various kinds of outcomes, there will have to be some kind of a rhythm after the weekend. And how do I find or start a team? All right, let's look at this. So I'm going into the participant single source of truth into the Exploring Teams page. This is Exploring Teams at Complexity Weekend. If you just want to go right away to making a team seed, then you can go to Team Seeds and you can click on the Team Seed form. This will open up a form that you can fill out some questions, and one person can fill this out by themselves, or several can be filling it out in discussion. It asks for some basic contact information about what issue or area you're going to be exploring, and just any details you have for your next steps. It also asks whether you would like your team to have a time to share a pre-recorded or live 5 minutes or less at the closing ceremony, just to gain visibility and kind of like document the team's success over the weekend in forming. And then also, is your team open to having new members join the team? And if you click yes here, then back on the Team Seeds page, you'll be added to this row for visibility. And so here we see there's already 4 teams that have been seeded. And for each of these teams, you can see who to contact, their email or their Keybase username, the topics and focus. You can confirm that they're all open to having new members, at least inquire about joining, what kinds of skills might be relevant, and what next directions are for that team. So these are 2 ways that you can get involved. You can fill out a team seed form about anything. It can just be like, I'm looking for co-adventurers because I'm curious about how ants do X. Or you can see this as kind of like a menu of real humans who are willing to engage on these topics, potentially with you on these teams. So how do you join a team or start a new one? Go to the Team Seeds page and then fill out the team seed form, or contact somebody who has already seeded a team. Then,
I guess it's amazing. We've already got 4 team seeds. I know I'm going to have one shortly about the DAO committee at CW. So we're up to 5 already. I think that might be the fastest I've seen that many teams. I mean, we're almost halfway to the normal yield of teams. So it sounds like a great cohort in terms of collaboration. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It is great to see. And what we'll be doing is we have a project seed template. And in this template, once you seed a team, a page will be created for you. So the 4 are down here. I'm going to paste in that template right now. And that will be some of questions to have discussions around. And we'll talk more about this in the coming Teams Fair. But we think of the teams as being in like a garden or an ecosystem of collaboration. So when you plant a team seed, it's really just a minimal unit of like, hey, has anyone thought about complexity in this area? And then within the space of our cohort, there's a page that's created for you where you can add any other information, and you can work out in the open with a cohort like this, or take it and work however you want. CW is trying to provide some default tools and ways of working. For example, if you connected with somebody in Gather and you all know how to use this document with the weekend program, then it's very easy to start collaborating there. But if people prefer to use some different document or use some different video platform to connect, that's what's important. So continue however you want. But for those who want, these pages will be editable, and so they can serve as your space for taking that team seed and then ultimately completing a team sprout form, which is a slightly more involved form. And the questions are here below, so you can draft them and go over the answers together. So those are some of the key pieces of the team's process. Let's continue to participating in CW as a team. So,
well,
how can we do?
Yeah, I just want to highlight the sub pages in Coda for your team. That is accessible to the whole cohort. So it's up to you and your team as to the degree in which you want what you're working on to be more private. So if you find that that's a little too public for you, you maybe don't want to expose the answers to those questions to the whole cohort, feel free to take those questions and the template and those subpages and take them wherever you'd like to work, right? We'll try to provide some sort of default set of tooling for your team, but ultimately, it's your team, and your team can use whatever tooling you want. You can use an entirely different stack of communication tools. So it's up to you to define that privacy boundary and the tooling that everyone on your team is excited to use and continue using.
Yes. CW is like a Teams common. We form out in the open, and then we sometimes move to the periphery as it becomes right to work differently. But what's so amazing is that the center of activity and the commons, like the town square, is really accessible and encouraging of everybody to come participate. And the CW committees especially try to uphold that vision. So if anyone has any questions at all about being involved in teams, we promise you that there will be a CW committee where you will be welcome to join, hang out, just learn, follow along, contribute any number of different skills. And then if you find a team seed that somebody else has already done that sounds interesting, that's great. If you see some dots that need to be connected, that's your opportunity to make it happen. And if you don't want to do anything team related, amazing. That's fine. Just show up.
Okay. Or if you want to form a team that's entirely private, maybe you've met some people and you want to collaborate and you want to start a high growth tech company that's going to be stealth for a while. You don't want anyone to know for a while. Don't fill out the team seed form. Have a completely private engagement, and no one even has to know. And I know that's happened a lot actually in the past. So there's teams of all kinds and all varieties, and just submit the form if you want it to be somewhat public to the cohort.
It's like a fractal tip of the iceberg, because again, the team seeds are just those that choose to have visibility within the CW committee. So just like Sean said, there are teams and relationships that form and are not reflected in the team seeds form. So we think of it as like a lower bound or the most visible bound of what is happening in teams. So how can you participate in teams in our last little bit here? You can check the team seed forms and see who else is out there in the team seeds. You can participate as individuals or as teams in facilitated sessions. Many of them are very directly or indirectly team related. In the flexible time, which is alternating with the sessions, that's like a really important opportunity to connect with your team, coordinate, make sure that you're all on the same page with how you're going to be proceeding after the weekend, how you're going to stay in touch, how you're going to meet, what rhythm, as well as to welcome new participants onto your team. And also in the flexible time, facilitators and other peer facilitation energy is in the space. So it's a great time to be getting some early alignment with your team. You can also use any of the other tools that we've been discussing, like the Coda, to work on your team and so on. And then if you want to, you can record a video as a team for the closing live stream. So let's go to the closing live stream. What are teams going to do on the closing live stream? Well, they're encouraged, but by no means required, to share whatever they would like about their team during the closing live stream ceremony. That'll be the last event of the weekend on September 25th. And it's around 5 minutes. It can be 5 to 10 minutes if somebody would like. And we just encourage the team to share authentically whatever they want to on that public live stream. And it can be anything listed here, or whatever feels relevant to share. Their purpose, diverse perspectives, problems defined, feedback gathered, potential solution approaches, how or if you'll continue after the weekend, the story of how it came to be. Like, it makes me think of Team Catechism Speedrun, Cat Speedrun, where we had a session and then several people stayed after the session, some questions were asked, some documents were shared, and then it was like we were in the team instantly, and then that fused back in with the .teams committee, which ended up like lifting it from the personal commitment of anyone there and brought it back into the commons so it could be of service to CW. And so it was an example of how like the connections that we had after a session where we all showed up kept a few people interested in the topic, and we wanted to align our vision in the short term with serving CW. And then also over deeper timescales, it's helping us think about a few areas that might be outside of CW. So it was like, however you want to have your team form is just a great way for it to happen. Sean?
I think that story is so amazing. And I think, up to this point, CW's been operating for several years now. And I know those stories are all out there, and I've heard them anecdotally, but I'm just very excited to start capturing those stories and sharing them for the teams that want to be shared in that way. Because I think that will be exciting for a lot of people to discover this type of ecosystem level teamwork that's been going on.
Yeah, it's a question that we all ask ourselves and we hear so often, which is, where is complexity being applied? And just as Sean mentioned, over the several years, we've heard many things, and we're just starting to have the infrastructure as well, the technical infrastructure and the social infrastructure. And just like we spoke about with Carolina on the opening live stream, like some of the privacy and consensual and ethical infrastructure to understand how to go about sharing and giving visibility to different aspects of teams. And that's to a large extent what the .teams committee is interested in at CW. And so if you go to the team seeds pages, you'll find the .teams committee itself. And Jessica and others have raised so many critical perspectives for .teams, and will be active for the coming months in advance of the next weekend. So, Teams Beyond Complexity Weekend. Last slide here, then we'll go to the interactive part. So, level of commitment is up to you. it is all good as long as it's communicated. Keep the annual calendar and rhythm of CW in mind, that your team can use those times to reconnect, glean new insights, find new participants, get visibility. You never know who's going to hear your spotlight talk. And one point, Sean, do you want to mention the last one?
Yeah, I think, if you decide with your team that you do want to pursue some amount of work after the weekend at some commitment level, something we highly encourage as just like a team's common kind of best practice is to set up some sort of recurring time. So if you depending on the goal, if you have an immediate goal where you do want to apply for this grant in the next month, for the deadline, then make your recurring meeting time a little more frequent, right? Maybe it's every week or twice a week or something to get to that point. If it's a little more casual, it's like we want to get to know each other a little bit and then decide if we want to pursue this goal together. Then maybe you can meet monthly or every other week at a less intense frequency, and then you can always change that tempo and that frequency depending on the goals of your team. So I think that is.
Yep.
Yeah, a good practice. And I think another one real quick I'll just highlight, and it'll be related to the live session I'll be doing. But if you do get serious about a particular goal, it's important really early on for your team, and the team sprout form may help with this, but to really question your assumptions together. And one really good way to make sure you're not moving in the wrong direction is to talk to stakeholders as soon as possible. So if your team is getting excited about helping the healthcare system, right? Immensely complex system, but like intervention in some way that might benefit everyone. Have a phone call with a nurse or with a doctor or with somebody in someone's network, and you can ask the cohort for any of this help for a connection. But get their feedback on your understanding of the problem, on a potential solution approach you're thinking of. Just to make sure you're grounded in the actual lived experience and wisdom that people who are in that system day to day have, right? And what I really want to highlight is that we're not going to try to over intellectualize problems. We're going to really try to meet them where they're at in the real world, and then let the complexity terms get embodied with that understanding, and not coming into too abstract of an angle.
Awesome. Let's flip over to slide 15 and talk for a little bit and engage on the Jamboard. How do we best collaborate on complex projects? I'm sure both of you have been engaged in probably different complex projects. What makes a project complex? How do we best work on it? And then one other question I guess I'm kind of curious about this morning is, what is the difference between a project and a team?
What do you think, Carly?
Well, this last one, I guess, what makes the difference between a project and a team? I suppose a team can stay together and do all sorts of different projects. You can create a team that, I guess you could create a team that ends as the project ends, but I think ideally you could stick together and do all sorts of things over time, and your goal can even change as a team throughout. So you can work on something, and then you learn something from this project that you just worked on, and then you move towards another thing together. You adjust depending on what you just did. And I added just this good communication around there, because it's something that we mentioned in the first live stream as well. When you're bringing together different perspectives, once you're dealing with tricky situations as well, complex problems, I think it's key to just communicate well and over communicate, especially in a digital space. There is a lot of room for sometimes for the communication to have some hiccups. Like, for example, just anecdotally, you might be on camera and then someone sends you a funny message that a notification pops up and you will laugh, and who knows, you might have rubbed off someone the wrong way and it wasn't intended at all. So always keeping that in mind, that technology has its limitations for communication. Yeah. And I see kindness there. I really like this one, and I really like the one, assume kindness.
Yep. The team is like the set of people where we get to create a little team culture and memes and themes and narratives and shared intentions and cultivating hopefully positive cultural attributes like kindness, patience, respect here, and then aligning those feeling good aspects of the team with doing things. I guess a team doesn't have to do anything. Whereas a project has a little bit more of a connotation of making something happen. And a project might have a rotating group of people working through it. So, Sean, talk to stakeholders, get feedback early and often. Very key points. Yeah, what would you add about that?
And that's not just at the beginning too, that's throughout. Like you have to constantly keep grounded to the reality of the system and the the approach that you're taking, everything like that. It's very, very easy to get off on a tangent that ends up not impacting the world that you're roving.
Cool. So I added one, complexity as the gripper and the gripped. It's because however our team is, sometimes we're focusing on a complex problem. So it's kind of like complexity is the gripped. Like it's what we're approaching. We're approaching a complex system. And then also complexity is kind of our gripper. Like we're using complexity to grasp or to work with or for sense making within some issue. And so there's this very interesting and recursive nature of working on complex problems with people who are also aware and working in complexity. And it's in this feedback loop. There's other important feedback loops and ways of working, but just for me, it's been completing this kind of Mobius strip feedback loop that helped move beyond what was in books and podcasts and lectures. There's no secret, awesome complexity book. There are many awesome books, and we could list them, and there's so many amazing resources. And there's something else that happens when someone is engaged with other people and thinking and asking how their team can be applying complexity to complexity. It's like just being fully immersed rather than feeling like maybe one is on a seashore and waves of complexity are just like crashing over us versus being like under the wave where it is a little bit more calm, strangely. So aim for sustainability in human relations, emotional journey, financial and other resources, etc. Very important from the angle of psychology in human relations and burnout and overcommittal. And then on the financial, the team's financial situations and just their spatial realities in different regions of the world can be changing very rapidly. And so balancing ways of making that work is its own complexity. Sean?
Yeah, I mean, at Flex Weekend, we have people from academia, people from industry. We've got people across the board. But what I find a lot of the times on the academic side is they'll have an idea they're really passionate about. They'll want to form a team around it, but then that team can struggle to really build like a business model around their efforts that will financially sustain the effort. And I just want to really highlight that it's important for teams to value their impact enough to want to capture enough value with what they're doing in some sort of business model to truly pay themselves in a way that honors them and their effort and is sustainable. A lot of people I think will sacrifice their financial health to be working on what they're excited about, but you can have both, and it's just a matter of lining up the impact that you're having with your work with flows of value, that allow your business to kind of capture. And I would see it as a business a lot of the times, even if it is a purely academic venture. I think you can still use the business perspective on it just to make sure it's sustainable in these different means. So I would challenge any teams that are heavily leaning on the academic side to think in that way. And then on the other side as well, if you're already planning on forming a business and whatnot, how can you take principles from academic teams and work and really infuse what you're doing with those ideas?
Nice. Very good points. Carolina?
Yeah, I was just going to say, this was something that I somehow stuck in my mind from the first team that I ever joined, was around, we mentioned academia and how to turn that into business, but also in teams that are academic, people were a little bit concerned. And this lesson came from people that had been in other teams before that one. Just be clear about, if you're publishing something, actually make sure that there's no attrition about whose name gets put on first or last, or and also be clear about sharing of information, I guess, because we also had a situation where it wasn't clear. And then there is sometimes attrition about how much people are willing to share the information that they are contributing to the team. And just being clear to each other about how much you want to share or how much you want to take credit for something if you're putting something out together. I think those can also be things that conversations that are worth having in some situations. That obviously depends on how fluid, on how relaxed your goal is, which is also, I'd like to point out, after pointing to all of these kind of technical things around the team, the fun that someone wrote here, have fun, make it fun, remember the fun. Yeah, that's also key.
I think the other side of that too, I totally agree with you that it's important to have those difficult conversations as early as possible. The flip side of that coin is you also don't want to have that conversation too deeply before there's anything produced. Because a lot of the times, especially I'm only used to like the startup world, people will be arguing over who gets 51% of the equity, or whatever, that 1% of equity, when the pie is 0, and then they never actually get to the point where the pie is anything worth fighting over, right? So that's actually a pretty common thing. And it's similar probably in academic teams, more about, the authorship and all that. If you haven't written anything yet, it's kind of a moot point, but you do need to have that conversation to not be totally caught off guard with people's expectations, but not to the point where you're not doing any of the work.
Yeah, great point. Great way to put it.
Yes, coming from more of a research side, the conversations can analogously look like, who's going to have this authorship position, or where are we going to have this paper be published, as if it was even within the control of the team alone, let alone the work having been done. Yet we can't get to that stage of the work being done without this kind of like building of trust and having the conversations all along the way. So again, Teams committee is working and iterating weekend after weekend to provide more clarity around how to structure conversations about attribution, information sharing, intellectual property. These are areas where there aren't single standard or best practices, because if one considers the space of emergent, remote, global teams, even if 2 given people have a shared way of working, the third person joining that team, you can't guarantee that they're going to have that way of working. So those are important conversations to have. And there's a lot of different pieces to this puzzle. One way that can start the conversation is like starting with a clean workspace, and just adding in under a stated protocol or rule. Like, we're working open source on this new workspace. So yes, we've all been interested in this topic for many years, but what we add into this workspace is going to be with this way of working. And again, that's just one option that might work for some teams, but there's no cross-team single answer. And that's part of the complexity. It's the challenge and it's the opportunity, just like with complexity overall, to connect the generals with the specifics and making it work in the last mile. Like, the circulatory system has to work in the last mile. the supply chain has to work in the last mile. And so if we want to have connections on the edges or a mycelial network or a really inclusive, holistic fabric of community or society, it has to work in the last mile. And so it's one reason why in our opening live stream and so much front loading, we talk about values and guidelines and mission. And then we see teams as like a realization of how that comes to be. And by being aligned on what was front loaded, then a space opens up for there to be trust amongst people and be alignment and some understanding around, like, again, how much time commitment, what kind of financial goals are plausible or possible. All of these kinds of ways to collaborate arise, we hypothesize, with more skill when we can be in a community context where a lot of the background, as well as some of the tooling and so on, is provided in this team's garden. And then if, again, your team, you connect and there's something exciting and you want to do it outside of the community, you don't need any visibility, then CW is not going to stop that. So someone has written, each participant comes with their own expectations. Acknowledge that. Very important. Open-mindedness.
Yes, and also maybe allowing for participation at, we're also talking about setting regular times and all of that, but maybe in a team, there part of the complexity could be that some people are engaging more frequently than others, and that is okay. Or some people actually prefer to participate synchronously every week, but others don't want to join this. However, they are very active asynchronously, and if you have a channel where you can share in written format, in any other format, they can contribute a lot in that way, and spark ideas that are then discussed in synchronous time. So I think that allowing for that complexity can also spark a lot of interesting dynamics in teams.
I think especially in global remote teams, it will be interesting for a lot of teams where people are spread across the world, right? So like if it might be the working hours are offset slightly, where you have like a couple of hours where you're both awake and then the rest of the time you're both not awake. So you're gonna have to structure your team around synchronous interactions during that overlap time, and then role-based participation asynchronously outside of that overlap window. And I think, again, it just comes down to communication. And I just dropped role-based participation around the different ways and frequencies of participating, just because that's a really complexity-friendly way of kind of modeling in your head how people are contributing to something. It's the way that we model Complexity Weekend, where we do have organizers, facilitators, participants, supporters, associates. We have different roles so that it's easy to understand the types of actors in the system, their motivations separate from each other, their different guidelines, where we actually have values and guidelines that are different by role. It's just a nice framework for understanding differences amongst agents in the system.
Its complexity is the gripper and the gripped. Maybe in some future teams ecosystem, there's like model-driven teams where people can simulate what will happen with a team or have and imagine different futures or scenarios for their team and have that scaffolded. And then it's fun to imagine how far down the road that team could be while actually structuring it in the ways that many team conversations go. Like, well, we could go fully open source, but then I'm a little bit concerned about this being happening. And someone says, but then if this isn't open source, then what about that? Maybe there'd be ways to work with it, but we're in the moment we are. And so we that is kind of, it's really like touched on in almost all of these, is just recognizing the uniqueness of the team. That team has never been formed before. And maybe even that topic or that approach has never been taken by any team in that exact way. Possibly the issue was not existing in the same way several years ago, or maybe it's like a triple intersection and few are seeing these opportunities. And those are how we can find a lot of value in complexity. Like from the pre-weekend, in the intro to complexity slides, which we, I guess, removed from this Jamboard, we had a big list of complexity areas. Oh yeah, Sean? You're muted.
Sorry. I was just going to highlight in startups, like a common thing is that people like don't want to share their idea with anyone because they're afraid someone's going to steal it. And I just wanted to highlight the other side of that, where sometimes an idea or the market is ready for something and a million teams arise around that same idea. And even in that scenario, your team is going to be unique to any other team out there. And as long as you're passionate about wanting to solve that problem and you're dedicated to doing it, you have a really good shot at being the one to do it. So like a lot of the times what happens in entrepreneurial circles is it's kind of an early kind of immature instinct to not want to share with anyone. And as you become more mature in entrepreneurial ventures, you tend to share much more freely because you realize the odds are so low of, of there being, someone you're going to share with that's going to want to take your idea and even then do it in a way that your team in its uniqueness can't match or if you're functioning well as a team, pivot around. So I just kind of wanted to flip the other side of that point you were talking about.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we'll have just about 3 more minutes here, and then we're going to head into the team's fair. So let's just look ahead to some of the exciting things that'll be happening, whether you want to be joining teams or not. We're in the middle live stream. At 15 UTC with Jessica, we'll have a team's fair. This is the first ever team's fair. And it was like something that we had feedback around in a previous weekend. And so then teams committee worked on it over the last few months. And that's what we're bringing the first version to experiment with quite soon. That'll be followed by a 30-minute time to just chill, continue working, wrap up. Because again, it's in the flexible time where we make our experience what we make it to be. So connect with people, exchange information, and then also remember you can go to the People tab and add your contact information just more generally if you want. Then we'll jump back into the sessions. We'll have multiple sessions that are going to be weaving between, it looks like a lot of biomimicry and design, regeneration, emergent metabolism of soil. So a lot of conceptual connections that might come into play for your team, as well as I'll be doing a session with RJ that'll be about emergent teams specifically and talking about catechisms. There's going to be sessions happening all the way on through to the closing live stream. And in the hours before the closing live stream, there's some extra flexible time. And that's just for people to continue hanging out, working with their team, and so on. And again, in the team seed form, it asks whether you would like to present live or pre-recorded on the live stream when we have our closing ceremony. So for now, just be and gather when it's healthy and balanced for you. Just show up for each other, make connections, and make the best of this last 18 hours or so of the weekend. Email complexityweekend@gmail.com if you're having any questions or issues, and stay around. We're in the game. Any last comments, Sean or Carolina?
Do you want to go in the Jamboard just to show them the next few slides in case anyone wants to asynchronously drop what they want to offer? Or you can skip that one, I think the team sees one, but the next two.
Sure. Sure. If anybody wants to, slides 17 and 18. This slide says community support. I can give, and I am looking for. So maybe somebody's looking for or can provide language lessons, some human natural language or some programming language, or just I can give 30 minutes of feedback for somebody who needs it. Awesome. Perfect, Sean. Thank you. And then on slide 18, are you looking for team members? And here's some boxes for our team is missing some perspectives, skill sets, disciplines, etc., as well as I want to join a team. So this is like if you want people to come contact you, if you want to take the first step towards the team, then that's what this Team Seed page will help you find, with a growing list of team seeds that you can join in and help nurture, as well as how to set up your own. And you can also put a note on this Jamboard. And again, the CW organizers and facilitators have a commitment that if you want to join a team, we'll find a team where you're a respected and a valued and an authentic participant. All right. Thank you, fellows. See you in a few minutes at the Center Cafe for the Teams Fair. Bye.
See you soon.
Soon in Gather.